Hi, this is Penn. Penn Jillette, Penn and Teller. Big guy does magic, smaller guy next to me. He does magic too. He doesn't talk that much. I want to talk about Joseph Jaffe is not famous. And Joseph Jaffe is not famous. Joseph Jaffe is wicked not famous. Joseph Jaffe is superlatively not famous, and for good and sufficient reason. I mean, maybe his guests are famous. Maybe his guests are famous. He gets some famous people on his guests, but Joseph Jaffe himself is not famous. That's the important part. You can have famous guests and still not be famous. And if you want an example of that, well, Joseph Jaffe would be a really good example. Teller would do a better job at a talk show, and Teller doesn't talk, which you'd think would be one of the major qualifications of being on a talk show and not being famous. What's that, Teller? Oh, yeah, Teller says, Joseph Jaffe, not famous. Love you. Peace.
Woody-hoo!
Woody-hoo! Out here in the stream, as in the streaming era, I fight for my dreams. I get my heart into my living.
You encourage drinking or marijuana use on the show?
I don't need a fight, 'cause Evelyn's right. Or you could sponsor an emu. I'm Batman.
That's your tweetable moment, folks. That's your tweetable moment. If Mark Zuckerberg makes a metaverse, is that Web3? No, it's Mark Zuckerberg's metaverse.
He's like us. He's flawed.
Just a little segue.
That's some dope shit, dude. That's really, really nice.
Woody-hoo!
Woody-hoo! Yes, I'm gonna adjust my screen. There we go. And I'm gonna sit up straight. Pay attention. I'm gonna be a typical ignorant American by playing the wrong kind of music for a guest who is from Great Britain, from the United Kingdom. But this is the closest I have, my little Irish dancing a jig of joy. And I am joyful because I have Zoe Scaman in the house. What an unbelievable week. 2 guests who are going to be speaking at the upcoming Creator Economy Expo, Nora Dunn and Jamar Johnson, the entrepreneur. Baratunde Thurston yesterday. What a great, I went crazy with Baratunde. We ended up talking for almost an hour and a half. You know why? Because it's my show, damn it. And one of the comments was, great show, a little long, but great show. Well, sometimes that's what's got to happen. And I learned that little lesson from Mr. Howard Stern, the king of all media, except Web3. Them are fighting words. Yes, I'm challenging you, Howard Stern, because you are not the king of Web3. You are not the king of the metaverse yet, until you come on the show. Maybe he will come on, and most likely he won't come on. And that's totally okay. Well, I thought I would do something different today, which is kind of go straight into the seated soliloquy. Why not? And today's seated soliloquy, my friends, is called Bodacious. And you will see why in a moment. So I have an app that I use that allows me to find those incredible images, some of them that you like, I hope, some of the images that you like. And I went in today and I tried to find one for the word bodacious. And this is what came up. Couldn't find any image. And I tried one and I tried the other, and nothing came up. So, I decided to look at some definitions. What the hell does bodacious mean? Why are there no images of bodacious Maybe the image that I should have been using was bodacious J31, which was a Hall of Fame bucking bull. He was known throughout the rodeo, or is it rodeo, sport of bull riding, as the world's most dangerous bull. He was also known as the greatest bull ever to buck. Don't say that 3 times fast. What else do we know about bodacious? Let's use it in a sentence. The restaurant serves bodacious grilled lobster. Excellent, admirable, or attractive. Or maybe we could think about audacious in a way considered admirable, right? Those bodacious dudes have an excellent time playing games with death. Sounds a little bit of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. But what are we learning from this? Bodacious sounds maybe like audacious. Is it bold? What actually is the word, and what does the word mean? And I think maybe my guest today will be able to tell us, but I love it. I think we need to be more bodacious. We need to be more audacious. We need to be more bold. Maybe that's what it is. It's bold and audacious together, if we're looking at the definition, but in a way that people admire. So what's really going on here? What's going on here is that someone needs to make the move. Somebody needs to make the first move. Somebody needs to stick their neck out. Sure, that might mean taking a risk, but risk is relative at the end of the day, is it not? What is risky to me may not be risky to you. Risk is relative, and risk can be calculated as well. Sometimes it's worth taking the risk in order to be able to have a chance of being able to assume that reward. So I guess my challenge to myself, to all of you, is be more bold, be more audacious, be more bodacious in everything you do, and recognize that when you do it, it's actually not about you at all. It's about everyone else around you. You become the light, you inspire, you challenge, you ignite, and you allow other people to see your flame, to follow your flame, and ultimately to go where no person has been before, to boldly, to bodaciously go where no brand, where no entrepreneur has been before. Well, now, speaking of bodacious, it's time to bring on Zoe Scaman. Zoe is a bit of a Swiss Army knife, having worked in a variety of fields: brand planning, entertainment, strategy, digital communications, new product development, business strategy, and innovation. And she's done it on opposite sides of the world, quite literally, in Sydney, London, New York, and even Ethiopia. She's worked at groundbreaking creative agencies such as Naked Communications and Droga5, best-in-class film companies like Ridley Scott Creative Group, and forward-thinking innovative consultancies such as Undercurrent, London Strategy Unit, and The Upside. Her client list includes some of the biggest brands in the world. Maybe you've heard of them: Adidas, Google, Danone, Airbnb, Unilever, Coca-Cola, and PepsiCo. Maybe not at the same time. Currently, she can be found running her own strategy consultancy, Bodacious, with a focus on the intersections of entertainment, fandom, the creator economy, and the nascent rise of the metaverse, where she's setting innovative global strategy agendas for EA Games, Nike, YouTube, Zwift, Netflix, and the NBA. She also leads personal brand strategy for NBA star Luka Doncic. She recently published an in-depth look at the future of fandoms to tie many of these threads together, published a white paper on the future of the creator economy, and has since been invited to speak about topics such as both of those with the leadership teams of Lego, Tumblr, Pinterest, PepsiCo, Snapchat, and more. Are you not entertained? Are you not impressed? That is rhetorical. Yes, I am. Zoe, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
So Steve Garfield is here, and he said, hello, you're my lunchtime entertainment today. Thank you. Well, I think that's the goal of doing it at 1 p.m. Or where you are, 6 p.m. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. It's not 5 o'clock where you are. But welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So Zoe, I'm I did a little soliloquy on the word bodacious,
Mhm.
in terms of looking up what it means, what it doesn't mean, what it could mean, what it should mean. How do you define bodacious, and why did why did you decide to create an entire consultancy around and using this name?
Um, I think for me, bodacious has always had a kind of special meaning to it, because I've been obsessed with Maya Angelou for many, many years. I think most of us have, her writing and her kind of attitude and approach to life. And there was a particular quote that she had talking about the ability to reinvent yourself over and over and over again. And let me see if I can find it actually, because then I can actually read it to you. She says, each of us has that right, that possibility to invent ourselves daily. And if a person does not invent herself, she will be invented. So be bodacious enough to invent yourself again and again. And I just loved that idea of basically just, and you've got it up. There you go. Perfect.
How about
That
that?
idea of reinvention and kind of constant invention of oneself. And I think that idea of change and evolution and, investing in making that happen for yourself is really exciting. And yeah, it's the reason that I did it. A lot of people think it's something to do with Bill and Ted. And as much as I love Bill and Ted, they were not, sadly, my inspiration, although I'm happy to occasionally say that they were.
So, I mean, talk about, we did not rehearse this. This was completely,
Yeah.
I have, people have been impressed with some of the things that I've done, but nothing more than that. In the first 5 minutes, you're like, well, there's
Yeah.
this quote on Maya Angelou, and I'm just like sitting here going, excellent.
You're in
Come,
my brain. I don't know how
yeah,
you knew that, because I
come
haven't
in,
really said that
come
much.
into my web. Said the spider to the fly. But this quote, let's look at it for a second. This idea
Mhm.
of invention or reinvention
Mhm.
almost on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds to someone, to the untrained eye, as exhausting, maybe petrifying, and to someone else maybe exhilarating.
Mm. I think it doesn't mean that it can be all of those things, depending on how you want to approach it. And I don't necessarily think that means that you need to throw out your life. And especially if you're talking about the professional realm, I don't think you need to throw out all of your skill sets every 5 minutes and jump into something brand new. I still think you can stick with a particular métier that you've got yourself into, or a particular path that you're going down. But I think for me, it's just about the open-mindedness to not know what's coming next, and to embrace whatever is kind of thrown at you and try and make the best of it.
So I love that. I love that that build, which
Mm,
is to actually attach and connect, being open-minded to
mm,
this idea of invention and reinvention. And I think part of that, one of the things I often say to brands is, don't pay for attention, pay attention.
mm,
You actually have to be present. You have to be plugged in, and you have to see things not for what they are, but what they could become,
mm,
and only then decide, do I actually want to change course? Am I prepared to input this into the machine, and realize, once I do that, that it may actually create a course correction?
yeah.
Again, not for everyone.
Not for everyone, no. And I think that's the other thing as well, as being respectful for, other people's choices, other people's paths, that kind of stuff. But mine has always been one of, reinvention and embracing change and being curious. And I've often referred to myself as a magpie, because I just like going after the shiny stuff, as and when it's interesting. And it suits me. That's just what suits me better than staying in one linear trajectory and trying to stick with it.
Probably better to be a magpie than a canary in a coal mine. Um, but
Yeah, absolutely.
but the thing about, and now you're sending me down a rabbit hole, or magpie hole, to actually research the magpie. But the thing
Mm,
about the bright and shiny object is that, there is a buyer beware. There is the idea of being lured like a moth to a flame. Not every bright and shiny object is the
mm,
right bright and shiny object. There's that, the fish, I forget what it's called, but I certainly wrote about it in Built to Suck, that has the light,
mhm,
it has almost the light in front. And when you are attracted to that bright and shiny object, it's often met with your demise. But the idea, I've also been like that. I've also been someone who leans in to something that is new, that is exciting, that is untried and untested. And when everybody else jumps in, I get bored and I move on. It's just who I am.
Yeah.
How do you determine what is the right bright and shiny object, or is it the opposite, which is all bets are on?
I think to an extent, all bets are on. I always want to make sure that I'm researching and having a look at where things might go. But I think I'm also looking at it from the springboard of the past. So I'm looking at it based on 20-something years of experience in the industry, for example, and kind of going, well, I understand this about business and I understand this about technology, and this has been my experience in the past. And if I tie all of these things together, does this shiny object over in that corner make sense? Is it based on something that I think might have some potential? But yeah, there's loads of other shiny objects that I've looked at, got a bit excited for about 5 minutes and gone, no, fuck that. I'm not going down that route. That's not the right way for me to go. But I think it's always based on doing your own research and not necessarily listening to the evangelists nor listening to the naysayers, but finding ways to make it relevant and meaningful to you.
One of the interesting bright and shiny, it's not even a bright and shiny object. It's more like a tarnished and discarded object is the QR code, which is above your head right now.
Yeah.
It's just been incredible to see. It's all about timing, right? I mean, we were discussing Second Life earlier as well. Now suddenly the QR code, is the ultimate connection, the ultimate direct to consumer or consumer to brand, C2B mechanism. And right now, people, if you've watched the show, you would know that I'm giving away Jaffe coin right now. People that are using that QR code, and what makes it interesting is the QR code. 2 points. One is it's gated, so people need to own a certain amount of Jaffe. So there's a retention play as opposed to an acquisition play. But the other is that it's only live while the show is live. So the message sent out is I want to recognize and reward live tune in. But the QR code is the classic example of don't write. You write off anything at your peril, especially if you haven't tried it and if you haven't figured out what the use case is.
No, 100%. And I think I was trying to wedge in QR codes to every possible creative idea for all of about 3 months or something along those lines, probably back in around 2009, 2010. And it was never going to work. It was never going to take off because we hadn't necessarily forced the use case. We hadn't necessarily educated the public on what the benefit of this was. And, I then started ridiculing it because I tested and it wasn't working. And I thought QR codes will never work. And then obviously that was the main thing that basically got us through the pandemic when it came to restaurant ordering or connecting with different people or experiences when you were out and about, allowing your 30 minutes of walking time. And I had to eat my words on that one because I was completely wrong.
And by the way, it's okay to eat one's words, especially if using a QR code to order one's words from a restaurant. But sometimes I like the idea of, first of all, there's a humility that comes from being able to say, hey, I was wrong. I mean, we can't all be right all the time, but there's a more important point, which is that how many people are writing off new technology and new approaches, emerging tech, and they've never actually tried it out. They've never actually tried it out. It's not possible sometimes for people to have foresight to see something no one could imagine, a pandemic. But now, I mean, my students, I teach strategic communications at NYU. My students just had to pitch. So we did a whole role play. They were pitching for Uber's business at the start of the pandemic. And 2 of the groups had QR codes in their presentations. And, for me as the client, but also as their professor, just to be able to get a copy of their deck straight away. And I just loved that use. There was a new use case, which is the ability to immediately just say, here it is, and you can download. And by the way, we think differently and we act differently too. So got my attention.
Yeah. No, and I think that's what we always need to be looking for in terms of what is the potential use cases for all of these new technologies. And I think one of the things that we don't necessarily think about properly is what are the future use cases that maybe we haven't even thought of yet, and how do we stop ourselves from shutting down an entire technology because we can't attach it to a use case that is immediately familiar today. And I think that's one of the things, especially with things like social media when that first came out and Web3 when that first came out, we are now seeing use cases that we never even imagined. And we're now unlocking new opportunities that we never even imagined. And yet, if you were to join the naysayer group at the very early innings, none of that would have been possible, because you've just been like, well, I can't go and order, I don't know, a pizza on Second Life. And so therefore it's completely useless to me. I can't possibly use it and it's going to fail. As opposed to understanding that it was going to create an entire world, an entire virtual economy. And that was going to potentially pave the way for some of the stuff that we're seeing, towards whatever the hell the metaverse might be in the future now. And again, I think it's just really important to try and maintain an open mind and try and err on the side of optimism. You can be cautious, you can be cynical in some instances, but for me, I think it's always been beneficial to try and see all different sides of the equation if you can.
Do you remember in the early days of Second Life, there was Anshi Chung. Anshi Chung was the first real US dollar millionaire to emerge from Second Life, from selling real estate, virtual real estate. And it's funny, it's like, hey, 2006 called, they want their metaverse back. We were there and we saw it and experienced it. And now we see all the accessorizing going on with your Chibi Galaxy or, or your Honey or whatever the case may be to live in the metaverse. It's a little bit challenging now because unfortunately I keep getting those airdrops of all these accessories, and I'm afraid to touch any of them because of all the rug pulls and the scams. The scams, not the scams, if you know what I'm saying. Little inside joke between Zoe and myself. Well, let's do a little segue as well, because when you are not thinking and imagining the future through bright and shiny objects, you are in the garden and you've been on a mission, a cottage mission, and you've been sharing it through Twitter. Today is actually National Gardening Day, so I figured very appropriate to share with you. There you go. So it's like everything was meant to be today. Zoe, you were meant to be on the show today. But you've been sharing photos of your garden, of your cottage. How is everything going? In fact, you just told me now that this is the very first time you're using your study.
It is, yeah. It's been a really difficult process, but a positive one. And now I feel like I'm hopefully reaching the end of it in the next few months or so. But yeah, trying to run your own business and run a renovation at the same time is not something that I would recommend anybody undertakes. But I watched too many episodes of Grand Designs and I skipped through all the painful bits and just got to the end and I was like, I can do that. That looks nice. And didn't realize it was going to be hellish. But it's been an amazing kind of growth experience for me. But it's been kind of weird as well, because working in this kind of virtual realm and working in sort of Web3 and Metaverse and all this kind of stuff, and then actually trying to build a house which feels really real and in the countryside, and you've got birds chirping, and it feels like a real kind of cognitive dissonance, trying to connect those two things. So both of them feel unreal in different ways.
So are you wishing that you could teleport, you could fly, or?
I'm wishing I could fast forward. That would be nice.
Well, you know what? I can tell you that construction is never never a pleasant experience, but it will be worthwhile. And thank you for sharing that with us. Now, you've shared some other things as well, maybe not with the world, but certainly with me, which is a little segment that we call Fun Facts, where I attempt to use the world's worst Photoshop, which is completely intentional. In fact, I'm not even using Photoshop. I'm using PowerPoint. That's how bad it is, to be able to find out some fun facts about my guest. And this is what we found out about you, which is you applied to be on a UK singing TV show when you were 11 as Whitney Houston. So, I mean, could you have maybe picked a singer that didn't have like a voice that was a 15 out of 10? And unfortunately, I mean, you got rejected. Thankfully, in the world of marketing, you got rejected.
Yeah, I was heartbroken. So I came home every single day from school and I'd go into the lounge and I would put on the Bodyguard soundtrack and I would sing my way through every single song. So to this day, I know pretty much every single word when you start playing that soundtrack again. And I spent ages on my application and my questionnaire, and then I got my rejection letter and I was gutted.
Well, we're not going to ask you to do any version of the Bodyguard.
Yeah.
Just as well. I mean, maybe it will help audience growth. You never know. I mean, you saw some of my attempts to sing on the show, and it's all been downhill from there. But here's a really interesting thing about you: is you've been wing walking, which is
Mhm.
basically strapping yourself to the top of an airplane. We actually have a photo of you in action. I mean, that is unbelievably skillful. I don't know how you do it.
I mean, I look incredibly flexible in that photo as well. So yeah.
And the hair doesn't even move.
Doesn't move.
But do you actually walk the wings, or you're strapped and you don't move?
You're strapped and you don't move. If you are a professional, you can actually walk the wings. So it is probably a bit rich them calling it wing walking, but it was fucking terrifying, to be honest. I did it in the Cotswolds, and they strap you to an old-fashioned aeroplane, and you have this little kind of bicycle seat that you perch your bum on, and then you hold on for dear life. And then they go up and down and all around, and you've got G-force, and yeah, it's pretty full on. I basically agreed to it as a drunken dare. And regretted it bitterly the minute we started driving up, and I started seeing other people. I was like, how do I get out of this? And then I decided just to go first and rip the Band-Aid off as quickly as possible. But yeah, it was quite the experience.
And you've done it again, or it's just a one and done?
I think it's going to be a one and done, unless somebody dares me again while I've had too many glasses of wine. But at the moment, it's a one and done.
Well, I meant to be at the earlier you saw at the Creator Economy Expo.
Yeah.
And I've been challenged to go skydiving the night before.
Amazing.
And with all the peer pressure, I basically said, okay, maybe, I don't know, but there's no fucking way in hell that I'm going skydiving. I want to. I want to. Well,
I definitely think you should do it. I think it's one of those things where you've just got to give it a go, and you're probably going to hate it at the time, but it's going to be a fun thing to talk about later.
Listen, if something happens to me, will you take over the show, Zoe?
Happily, yeah. I'm not sure I could do you justice, but I would give it a go.
So you don't need to do me justice, because I need to do you justice when it comes to you have an amazing presence on Twitter. And it's funny, but like, I don't know how you got into my feed. But suddenly I saw a comment, and I think I responded. It was like it was a provocative statement, and I think I came back with a different point of view. I don't know if I was disagreeing or just kind of adding a different perspective, but I can tell you within 5 minutes, I'd set the bell. I'd activated the bell, saying I want to make sure that every single one of her tweets, reaches me as much as possible, because it was just fresh, and poignant and relevant. And so I thought maybe we'd look at a few things from not just your Twitter feed, but also Twitter feeds in general. Starting with this one. This was an interesting one.
Yeah.
My first question is has he been on Joe Rogan's show again? Is it a little bit of doobie making its way into I made an offer? Like, what do you there are two parts to this, I guess. One is just the I don't know, this isn't bodacious, this is just arrogant, but like, I made an offer. Like, well, fine. Like, I also made an offer, to buy a secondhand lawnmower for $25. And then what do you think this even could mean for Twitter?
I think it's definitely arrogance. I think that's probably the first thing to say. I think he puts a lot of shit out there just to provoke, first and foremost. But from what I understand, his inclination around this is this idea of free speech. It's this idea of Twitter isn't moving in the direction that he was hoping it was going to move, and he has the ability, because he's got the cash, to be able to do something about that. And I think, it's kind of ignited this war around free speech and actually what that means, and have we forgotten what that means, and who are the people that kind of own it? And if we allow completely open free speech, does that increase division or decrease division? And I think it's a really interesting debate. I mean, I, for one, hope that he doesn't end up buying Twitter, because I think it would be disastrous for the platform, purely because I just don't think that he has any clear vision or background in this particular space. That's not to say he's not a highly intelligent man who knows how to run businesses and build incredible products, because he does. But I think in this instance, he's in the wrong field.
It's also interesting, though, because like I turned the bell on for your tweets. He is now essentially, for all intents and purposes, the new Donald Trump. He's the person that whatever he says is going to move markets, move mountains, and get everybody talking. In this case, it's very it is very meta, because he's actually talking about the very platform that, this is the medium is the very Marshall McLuhan at the moment, which I'm actually teaching about today in my class. But it's a little insane how he's also influencing and affecting an entire platform. And I see maybe a little bit of the whole centralization versus decentralization argument, because what do we use to engage in Web3? We use Discord and we use Twitter. And Twitter is decidedly not Web3. So I'm not sure how it all ends.
I don't know where it's going to go. I think that there are some really interesting product conversations and potential product experiments that are starting to move Twitter towards decentralization. I think that is the grand plan. In terms of opening up the platforms, it turns into an API toolkit. And I think that's probably where it's going to end up. And yes, it's been a hell of a lot of a slow burn so far. But that's where I think it's headed in the very near future. So that's what I don't really understand as to why he wants to do the offer now. And it feels like maybe he just wants it to hurry up. Maybe he wants to take it in a different direction. Who knows? But I think that he has become a little bit overzealous with his power and his influence, in terms of knowing full well that anything he tweets, as you said, can move markets or change brands or people's perception on the whole, get him into mainstream news outlets. And I think that might have gone to his head just a tad. So yeah.
This is also very, gets back to like, it's very Jungian when you look at, for example, the various personas and this idea that a superpower, if over-indexed, if you lean into it too much, if it consumes you, can actually become an Achilles heel. So I was actually thinking, as you were saying, when you said the word overzealous, can you actually be, do you think, over bodacious? Is that possible?
I think it depends on how you define bodaciousness. I mean, I guess, if you look at the etymology, it's bold and audacious wrapped into one. So yeah, I mean, if you were going to be a complete dick, then, you could definitely be over bodacious. But I think, the way that I tend to see it, as I mentioned, is about this idea of bodacious reinvention as opposed to bodacious cockiness. So that for me is two separate things.
I like it too, because it's a qualifier, right? It doesn't sit by itself. It qualifies, and it, and it modifies, and it actually amplifies something else. Well, you spoke about this idea of don't be a dick, but this is something else. This is on your banner, which I love. It's basically like, this is your mantra, right? Be fucking nice. Otherwise, I'm coming after you.
Yes.
I mean, what's your thoughts about, first of all, about this ethos and about this, this mantra, and then I guess, how do you respond, and how do you, you certainly do act and react to everything from the bro culture that exists to quite frankly, the fact that there are a lot of dicks on Twitter, literally and figuratively, and also just people that are just mean.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for me, I always try and come at everything from a position of kindness. I've got be fucking nice on the background. I've got it's cool to be kind on my phone and as a background. And I just think that if you just approach everyone with a kind of open mind of everyone's fighting their own battles and everyone means well in some capacity, then we're all going to have better discourse. We're all going to be able to share ideas in a way that feels a bit more positive and a bit more like we're building on other things as opposed to tearing people down. And I think one of the things that I've noticed, and I'm sure other people have as well, in the last couple of years, especially, in the kind of tech industry or in the advertising industry or, whatever you want to be in, is a lot of just negative energy and a lot of people sitting atop their pedestals and punching down to other people. The kind of idea that it's a great fun thing to do, to just rip ideas apart and to rip people's opinions apart and all of that kind of stuff as well. And I just don't think it's getting us anywhere. And I think what's happening is people are getting more and more scared to put their thinking out there because they're worried about backlash. I think we've got a massive risk aversion within the creative industries anyway, as a result of a lot of this. And I think, there are, unfortunately, people, mostly kind of men of a certain age that have been given a massive pedestal, especially within the ad industry, who use that pedestal to shit on other people and to shit on their work and their efforts. And any effort also to kind of push things forward or change or experiment or say, why don't we try doing it this way instead? And I hate that, as a position to be. I mean, surely you've got better things to do with your time and your energy than to make other people feel awful about themselves. And so that's something that I try and push against. That's not to say that I'm always going to be lovely and nice and sunshines and rainbows, because when someone does, push at me, or when someone does attack me, I'm gonna bite back, because that's just the way, that I'm wired. But I also hope that in biting back and in doing so, hopefully they think twice before they do it to somebody else.
But that's what I admire about you, and that's what immediately and I forget what my tweet really was, is because I think what I said, and I don't even remember if I was disagreeing directly with you or just it was just an argument, but you can do everything and be nice about it. You can be respectful about it. And what I actually think, it's so funny that we spoke about Twitter, but the primary mechanism for people to engage in Web3 is called Discord. Like, Discord is actually not,
Yeah.
I mean, like, the word, it's like right in front of us and we're not seeing for it. So when I have someone on and they give me their Discord handle, I say discourse with them in Discord. Like, I get the discourse part, but Discord is not a good thing.
Yeah.
And I'll add just one other thought to it as well, which is, I think we need to be able to disagree with one another more often, but still do it in a kind, respectful way. So, and you will notice that, like, on a panel, for example, at a conference, someone will disagree with someone, and they'll say, first of all, they always feel the need to respond. And what I've learned now is, if someone disagrees with me on a panel, I just don't say anything. I'm like, okay, I said X, you said Y. Let the audience decide who they want to go with, rather than a tennis match.
I 100% agree with that. And I've been very conscious of doing that more so on Twitter and on other platforms. And I think, someone, I can't remember who it was, months and months ago, someone disagreed with me. And I said, okay. And they went, no, you have to back up your opinion. You have to kind of explain to me why you think the way you think. And I said, I don't have to explain anything. And I honestly don't have the energy or the motivation to get into a Twitter battle with someone whose opinion is different to mine, but also I don't care. I genuinely don't care. And there are better things that I can do with my time and my energy. So I think that idea of disagreeing with someone, whether it's on a panel or whether it's on Twitter, and then thinking, right, we've got to battle this out until somebody is crowned the winner. I think sometimes it's okay to kind of go, okay, that's fine. No problem.
It's like that Monty Python skit. You're supposed to haggle. And I'm like, no, I don't want to haggle. Just give it to me so I can escape the Romans. The other thing that I can't stand is when people say, I think we're saying the same thing. And I'm like, no, I don't think we are.
Absolutely not saying the same thing.
I don't think we are. It's okay. We don't have to, if we respect one another. I found one more thing, which from your, I mean, everything is great. Like, I didn't even know that there was something called D2A. So you've taught me something new, even in just looking at the feed today, which is direct to avatar economy. But I guess this is really what's happening here. I mean, these airdrops, and this is what's really happening. I mean, it is direct to consumer, except it's not a consumer, it's an avatar. This is just a cool concept. So thank you for teaching me this. This was very interesting.
Oh, no problem at all. Someone else definitely taught me that. I have no idea where, but I've definitely absorbed it from somebody else.
All right. So there were a couple of things that and also that you've been writing about in Substack, and I didn't even know where to start, but I figured let's just start with this idea, because you mentioned it earlier, of bringing risk-taking and experimentation back into marketing. I just want to hear, what is your point of view? What is your thought, your vision behind this? Because certainly I live this every day of my life, at least when I was in the corporate world, when I was, even as a consultant, as an author. How do you get people to take risks and recognize, of course, the great, Bill Bernbach line, safe advertising is the riskiest advertising of all. Peter Drucker, defending the past is far riskier than creating the future. And yet people do not live that. They produce safe advertising and they don't invent the future.
Yeah. I think that goes, I mean, there's a number of different reasons as to why that is, which I think we have to undo it in layers. And the first is going back to what I was saying previously, that we've got some quote unquote thought leaders in the industry who are incredibly powerful, incredibly influential, and they just delight in tearing people's ideas apart. You know, we've got industry magazines that find it funny to put people's ideas into Turkey of the Week, for example. And so we're really, really good at kind of tearing things down, but we're not very good at building things up. And I think initially, you know, especially when it comes to risk taking, the last thing that people want is to be, you know, ripped to pieces by a thought leader in Marketing Week or ripped to pieces by Campaign magazine. And so they're less likely to kind of put their best foot forward. Then we've got the data thing. We've got so much data at the moment, we are drowning in it and we don't know which way is up. And people are using data to say, well, you know, that didn't get a brilliant response, and, you know, analyzing everything to the nth degree. And I think when we do that, we move into a paint by numbers creative process, as opposed to a big kind of giant creative leap and the kind of risk taking on that front. And I think, you know, we've also got talent issues. So we've got a bunch of people who are just knackered and burnt out and don't have enough support, and they're jumping ship, you know, to go to other industries, or they're becoming their own creators and earning money directly that way, or they just don't have the support internally to be able to sell in more kind of crazy ideas because they're not necessarily, I don't know, senior enough, or they don't necessarily know how to wrap things up in such a way that it's going to make a business case for the craziness of their creativity. So when you start layering all of those different things together, it starts to explain the fact that we have just got, you know, advertising that looks like you could have written a script on the back of a postage stamp. And, you know, it's so boring as to be kind of, you know, video wallpaper. And I think that's one of the biggest problems. We don't necessarily have those gigantic creative leaps like we used to, you know, even kind of 15 years ago, 20 years ago, because we are basically, again, it's kind of death by a thousand cuts on all of those different facets.
It's so funny because I was actually talking to head of one of the largest associations in the advertising world this morning. And I actually were talking about Coinbase's QR code. And I said, that actually is probably the closest thing that we've seen
For a long time. Yeah.
compared to actually Apple's 1984 commercial. I mean, it wasn't a grand production. It was the lowly, I mean, it goes back to the lowly QR code that actually did something. I think it was like, I don't know, what was it, like 34 million million views or activations in 60, was it 60 seconds or even less? It was such a ridiculous number. And the thing is, I can just imagine all those creative directors so pissed off with that, like the insult to their core. But to me, that was just innovation at its purest.
I think, and I agree. And I saw so many bad takes about it. I mean, that idea actually did come from an agency, and obviously they were not initially given credit until someone stood up for themselves, which was amazing. But I think a lot of people started ripping it to pieces and were just kind of going, wow, where's the storytelling? This is just a gimmick. You know, this doesn't feel like it's putting across Coinbase's personality, that kind of stuff. It's like, oh, we are overthinking it. You're massively overthinking it. It is a fun, silly idea to go out to an absolutely gigantic, you know, audience and massive, massive event where you have to pay millions and millions of dollars to even get a 15-second spot.
Exactly.
Almost like they took the piss slightly. And because they did that, they didn't tap into the traditional tropes, which everybody now expects from Super Bowl, which is celebrities, comedy, you know, mini films, that kind of stuff. They did something completely opposite. And therefore, it's no surprise they got the results that they got. But I think, you know, in a normal agency, apart from obviously the one that came up with that, they would have just gone, they would have kicked that out of the room, you know, straight from the off, and kind of going, wow, where's the storytelling? Where's the narrative? What about this? How do we add this in? And I just think we overthink it. We haven't got that kind of gut reaction, you know, like we used to. And I think, you know, we were talking, you know, before the show started about Naked Communications, you know, where I spent a couple of years. And the ideas that came out of Naked were utterly batshit, like just completely insane. And that was what Naked was known for, was just coming up with ideas that nobody else would have the guts to pull off. And they did it anyway. And, you know, that's what made them so famous globally, because they just didn't give a shit. You know, they were essentially kind of throwing creativity at the wall and seeing what sticks. And, you know, whatever the most outlandish idea that they could sell to the client was, they got it through. And that's why they had to create Naked special projects, because so many of the production companies they were working with literally could not get these ideas off the ground. So they had to build their own internal capability to do it, because the ideas were so off the wall.
I loved it, and the thing is that what you need sometimes is a point of view. What
Mm,
you need is even a bad idea. What a bad idea does is it allows a great idea to be born from within the bad idea.
yeah.
Well, we can't do that, but what if we did this? And it
Mm,
opens up a whole new set of possibilities. I think in many respects, Zoe, that really what the space is lacking. And it's not even advertising or communications anymore. It's really just this idea of creativity
mm,
is that we really are suffering from an identity crisis,
mm,
and we don't know who we are, who we're meant to be. That is my segue to say today is Thursday. Thursday is Philosophy Thursday, and
mm.
previous guest on the show and good friend Tom Morris is our correspondent, and he submitted this today. It's called Know Thyself. So let's see what he has to say. I never watch these in advance, but all I know is that they are always thought provoking. So let's watch him, and then we can beat him up and disagree with him.
Hi, everybody. I've been thinking recently a lot about self-knowledge and self-awareness. You probably know that at the holiest spot in ancient Greece, the Oracle at Delphi, there was an inscription that's translated into English as "Know thyself." This advice has been repeated by most of the great philosophers, and maybe it was first discussed by Thales of Miletus in the 7th century before the Common Era. Diogenes Laertius, in his famous text Lives of Eminent Philosophers, tells us that Thales was asked a series of questions. A man came up to him and said, Thales, what's the hardest thing in the world? And Thales said, to know yourself. And the man said, well, okay, what's the easiest thing in the world? And we're told that Thales said, to give people advice like this. We'll pass by that one. Then he was asked a third question. What's the most satisfying thing in the world? And Thales said, true success. Now, as you read the philosophers following Thales, you come to realize very quickly that most of the great thinkers have believed that true success, deeply satisfying and sustainable success, depends on self-knowledge. If that's the most satisfying thing in the world, and it depends on what Thales called the hardest thing in the world, no wonder so many people find true success so elusive in their lives. Well, Socrates had a student that a lot of people haven't heard of named Xenophon, and the great management expert Peter Drucker said one of Xenophon's books, The Education of Cyrus, about Cyrus the Great, is the greatest piece of leadership literature ever written. That's a big claim. Well, I've read it 3 or 4 times, and I got to tell you, it's an amazing book. It's probably the first philosophical novel, maybe the first novel of any kind, about a person becoming great. And in the course of the story, Cyrus comes up against a leader who has a fierce reputation. Cyrus has to take the territory in a military way. And he believes it's going to be a very difficult battle, but it ends up being really easy. He defeats this king with no effort, seemingly whatsoever, and later goes to find the king to ask him, look, you were supposed to be really fierce, and you kind of were easy to beat here. What's the deal? And the king says to Cyrus, well, the deal is, I thought I knew myself. I thought self-knowledge was the easiest thing in the world. It's not. It's maybe the hardest. And because I had never been up against anything like you, I had a complete misunderstanding of my strengths and weaknesses. I've come to realize that self-knowledge can be the key to victory or to defeat. I want to urge y'all today to do some exercises in self-knowledge and self-awareness, because as one of my friends likes to say, 2 of the most important things in the life of any leader, the life of any entrepreneur, the life of any person wanting to be successful is self-awareness, self-knowledge, and self-management. Think about this some more. Happy philosophizing.
That's Tom Morris. He almost took my voice away.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. And I think the self-knowledge thing is something that is a lifetime project. I don't think you're ever fixed. I think you're constantly reinventing and flexing and changing. You know, I think about my, you know, my 20s, and I think I changed personality about 12 times, you know, during a decade. And I'm still doing it now. And I think, you know, the older that you get, this is just my personal experience, but the older that you get, the more comfortable you get, you know, in your own skin, the more you start to figure out, you know, who you are as a person, what you like, what you dislike, what your values are, how you interact with other people. But it's a constant learning exercise. You know, when I was at Naked, I was so young. I was like 24 when I joined there, and I basically, you know, bashed the door down, desperate to get them to hire me. And they used to call me the problem child, because they said, you know, you're brilliant, but fucking hell, you're difficult. And I was very, very particular. I was very headstrong. And it's taken me many, many years, you know, to kind of mellow. And I think I'm going to keep mellowing, you know, with age as well. But I think, you know, you broaden and you do soften. But I think it's because you absorb a level of confidence over time in who you are and what you want, and, you know, the life that you want to live. But also, I think you're more open-minded, so you're less stubborn. You take your blinkers off more often. And I think that's, you know, that's the most amazing thing about aging.
It's such a beautiful closing the loop back to this idea of being open-minded once again, in terms of this idea of invention and reinvention. And Tom, by the way, is watching, and he said, always love listening to these great and inspiring conversations. And my mother's watching as well, which is interesting because speaking of problem children, but that's how I've always been described as well. Maybe not in life, maybe in life actually, but certainly, you know, even it's why I can't work in a corporation, because I am the problem child. You know, I am difficult to work with, but that doesn't mean that I'm a difficult person. It just means I struggle to accept mediocrity. I struggle to you know, I struggle to operate in the middle. They're extremes, love and hate, and I embrace both. What I don't embrace is indifference and apathy. So I really do, you know, identify with that. I also thought to myself, you know, as you were talking, that in many respects, maybe what we don't know our partners anymore, our employees, our vendors, our creative allies. You know, one of the things that I know you spend a lot of time on now is this idea of thinking about new models for talent, for creators, for humans in the industry. I would love to spend the last just 10 minutes or so just hearing your point of view. And I mean, you're doing such amazing things. I'm going to just make sure that people know that, I mean, this idea of thinking about new business models for the creator economy and the future of fandoms. I mean, this is the essence. 1,000 true fans. This is the Holy Grail, right? This is the code, the Da Vinci Code of the creator economy. So I would love to hear your thoughts on where you think this is heading, and how these bigger corporations that are suffering from the identity crisis can better cope, collaborate, and connect with this new creative class.
I think the challenge at the moment is the big corporations are very much still seeing people as pigeons to put in holes. And they're still seeing them as kind of cogs in the machine and employees, and, you know, being able to dictate to them, you need to be in the office, I don't know, 5 days a week. You've got to work between this hour and this hour. You've got to turn up, you've got to do this, and then you can go home and we'll pay you your salary. And I think, you know, with the creator economy, we're not necessarily going to be seeing, you know, a million millionaires from the creator economy. Actually, maybe we will. And not everybody can necessarily be a creator. But I think what is interesting about the creator economy is it's teaching us new ways of working, new ways of earning, new ways of interacting, new ways of, you know, the value of cultivating community, of building reciprocal relationships with complete strangers online. And I think that is starting to bleed into corporate culture. And I think especially in the creative industry. So, for example, if you look at the ad industry, we have been flogging our talent to death for way too long. You know, that happened to me, and I burnt out completely. I couldn't function. And we just get them to come in, we feed them pitch after pitch, we expect them to sleep in the office, to live on Deliveroo, to work till 3 o'clock in the morning. It's just a fucking television ad, no one cares. And it damages their health, it damages their relationships, it damages their confidence, their sense of self. And then we get them to do it all over again. And now, quite rightly, these young kind of creative types are looking, going, I don't know if I want to go into that industry. I think maybe I want to go somewhere else. Maybe I want to go into gaming. Maybe I want to go into tech. Maybe I want to actually build my own creative products and build my own audience and actually build a business doing it that way. And I think we're also starting to see more and more people saying, well, actually, to be a creator means variety. And so I don't have to do the same job and go and do a 9 to 5 and sit in the same office for 5 days a week and get my salary and my paycheck. Maybe I can have loads of side gigs, and maybe I can create a portfolio career, which I didn't quite realize was exactly what I have been doing my entire career. I was always told that I was flighty and unreliable because I got bored so easily, and then I'd bugger off and go and do something else. And I think what that is now turning into is actually you can have a portfolio career, you can earn money in lots of different ways, you can exercise your skill sets in different directions. And so we've got this disconnect between what the creator economy is educating people on and what the possibilities are, and where corporate culture, and especially kind of advertising culture, still sits, and never the two shall meet, unless we start looking at new models for talent within the industry. So how do we start to embrace this idea of people working in advertising as a side gig? How do we start to find different ways to reward their creativity? We're talking about, Web3 earlier as well. And, one of the biggest, I think, exciting things from Web3 was this idea of ongoing royalties or equity shares, and the ability for people who create cultural ideas or create sort of, creative thought pieces now have the ability to actually earn from that in some capacity. But in advertising, you get paid a straight salary for coming up with incredible creative ideas to the point that your brain is bled dry. How do we find new remuneration models to actually partner creator talent, with brands and with agencies, which have got more of a fair distribution of the value that they create? So I think all of that stuff is up for debate and up for, rejigging. And we need to do it sooner rather than later, because I'm seeing a massive talent drain in the creative industries at the moment, because quite rightly, they're turning around going, I don't want to work like that. I don't want to play by your rules. And now, because of all of these new monetization opportunities, I don't have to.
There was something you said that I want to emphasize again and frame or reframe, which is the creator economy is actually a portal or a proxy to the corporate ecosystem, meaning that, and I think it's a very, very important point, that the portfolio of a freelancer can now be applied to someone who is actually full-time. And what that means is that the side hustle, is part of the job description, or at least part of why they choose to give you more hours than they should, why they choose to commute, hopefully not commuting too much. And I've heard a lot about the idea of the goal here is that the side hustle becomes the main hustle, and the main hustle becomes the side hustle. That's a very difficult concept for corporates to understand in HR. But if you can actually turn those creative people and say, actually, let this job be your side hustle, and we'll still give you medical and benefits and et cetera, because what we want from you is the quality, not the quantity. A company that can actually take that risk, which I would argue is an educated and a calculated one, those are the companies that will attract. And the other companies are the ones that are going to find that when they open the talent cupboard, it's bare.
100%. I mean, at the last agency that I worked at, I never actually signed the contract. I was there for about 2.5 years, but I refused to sign the contract because it said in one of the stipulations, any ideas that you come up with while you work for this agency belong to us. And I just could not wrap my head around that. I was like, why the hell would I sign that? And that means that, if I come up with a $1 billion business idea while I work for this agency, legally, if I sign this, it belongs to you because that's my creative thought. And all I could envision was my brain being trapped in a cage that this agency held the key to, and I just would never sign it. And I think that there are still so many contracts today that say exactly that. So you're not allowed to go and work for anybody else. You're not allowed to have any side hustles. Any creative thinking that you come up with is owned by, the agency or the corporation. And that is just unbelievably archaic. And it's no longer chiming with, the commercial culture that we find ourselves in, where you just don't have to subscribe to that.
All your base will belong to us.
Mm.
Absolutely. Well, we have just a few minutes left. I want to just let people know that obviously this, for the whole month of April, I am working with Mr. Polizzi and letting people know that if they want to head out to Phoenix, Arizona, which will be May 2nd through 4th, there are going to be a bunch of cool things. I am going to be doing my show live from the floor. I'm just attending it, but I'm excited to just hang out with so many of these creators that I haven't met before as well. Zoe, that even Fanzo, I haven't met him. And if you use code Jaffe or Not Famous to register, you're going to get $200 off your pass. But wait, there's more. You're going to get a walk-on role on my show when I do it live, so we can hang out live on air, and we will get to have drinks together. So drinks with me, on me, and if I upset you or offend you or disagree with you, you can even throw the drinks on me. I don't know, whatever. Do whatever you want. But I just wanted to share that. Most importantly, do yourself a favor. And in fact, I'm going to do it right now. I like to do things live on air. So I'm actually going to join right now. So there we go.
Thank you.
So subscribe to Musings of a Wandering Mind. Love that so much. This has been Zoe Scaman, who is the founder of Bodacious. We covered as many things as our wandering scatty brains would allow us to cover today. If you want to and you need to follow her, not just follow on Twitter, but activate the bell. You will not be disappointed at Zoe Scaman on Twitter. If you want to work with Zoe, go check out bodacious.be. And of course, as I just did, subscribe to Zoe's Substack, Musings of a Wandering Mind. Zoe, thank you for your time today. There is nothing else to cover except to hear what Chuck Norris had to say about you.
You are Chuck Norris approved.
What he said.
Oh, I'm delighted. Absolutely. That's been a life goal of mine. I'm super happy.
We all live to get Chuck Norris's affirmation. I will be back, I think, tomorrow with NFT artist and artist in general, Ali Sabet. But otherwise, I will see you soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing with your host, multiple author, and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show, and if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.